My name is Annie, and I'm first like to start by saying how incredibly honoured and grateful I am to be able to speak in front of you today, and just to say how excited I am to meet some of you and to learn from your expertise in these areas that we're talking about today. I'm an 18-year-old girl from the UK, and as a young person from the UK, I've been blessed with certain rights and certain choices. For example, I have the right to education. I legally have to stay in school until the age of 16, at which point I then have the choice to move on to further educational opportunities, whether that be university or an apprenticeship scheme. I also have the right to protection under the law, where legislation is put in place by the government with the intention to protect me from harm and anyone or anything that tries to hurt me. I'm incredibly lucky, but I'm also incredibly saddened that there is no guarantee for every woman around the world to receive these basic human rights that they are entitled to. Women around the world to receive these basic human rights that they are entitled to, not just as a woman, but as a human being. Through my research, I've learned that in the Middle Eastern and North Africa region, women's rights are often dismissed, compromised, or violated, like too many places around the world. Forced marriage, FGM, honour killings, domestic abuse, these are all examples where women have little to no choice in the matter, and all are in some way harmful either physically or mentally. I don't think it's fair that in Egypt, around 90% of women aged between 15 and 49 undergo excruciatingly painful and unnecessary FGM procedures. I don't think it's fair that up until this year, Saudi Arabian women have not been given the right to vote and still cannot drive in their own country. And I do not think it's fair that despite progress made in the region to make sure that rape is classed as a crime in these countries, in countries such as Iraq and Morocco, men can escape this punishment by simply marrying their victim. But at the same time, I don't think it's fair that within my culture, women are often paid less than men for doing exactly the same job to the exact same standard. Up to 3 million women and girls across the UK each year experience rape, stalking, domestic and other forms of violence, and almost 1 in 3 girls experiences unwanted sexual touching in schools. My point is that no one culture is perfect. Because of cultural imperialism, which is the idea that one culture is superior over another, that has to be eradicated in order for any progress to be made. I believe that communication and education, especially when we're talking about education of boys, I think that's imperative to the progression of gender equality, especially with the growing advances in social media to spread the word on an international scale. But I also believe that in order for perceptions and attitudes towards women to change, and to make sure that there is a drastic shift in the way they are treated, criminalisation is key. Because of cultural relativism, which is the idea that actions should be understood by others in terms of that individual's culture, if that's allowed to continue within this context, there is going to be no understanding that these actions are wrong until strong and effective legislation is put into practice by governments with the intention to prosecute those who harm women. From my perspective, the world has the potential to be such a beautiful place. We have all these cultures and religions which have within them values that we can all benefit from. For example, the idea that family are the most important and that they are there to be loved. But also the idea of togetherness, often within a community, that we can all work towards something together. But then, of course, there are the aspects we spoke of earlier, which we've seen to not respect the rights of women. And we can no longer allow these harmful beliefs and practices to continue, with culture being used as an excuse. Because of laws put in place, and having people around me who genuinely believed in gender equality, I've had the privilege and the right and the protection to be a child. But now as a young adult, I feel a responsibility, like I'm sure many of you do, to make sure that the next generation grow up in a world that's free from discrimination and free from violence, so that they don't get married off too young, so that they have a substantial education, so that they are increasingly involved in political decision-making within positions of power. But we need to also encourage the idea that gender inequality is not something we just have to settle for. Change is happening all around us. People and attitudes and traditions are changing. For example, the Chinese tradition of foot binding, which dates back to the 10th century, it was completely removed by the early 1900s, showing that change is possible. Why can't we be that new change? Why can't it be us to bring about gender equality? Not just for ourselves, but for our children, and for their children, and so on. It can be done. I believe that gender equality is a fundamental truth that still needs to be, but can be, put into practice. Thank you.
So I'm